Ready to get the show started?
Thank you. Yes, we are. Welcome to everyone to today's webinar on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and what this means in the coaching exchange. We are very excited and honored to have the very skillful Patricia A. Lee of PAL Coaching and Consulting joining us today to present on this very important topic. My name is Stephanie Escott, and I'm the operations manager here at Coaching Out of the Box. Just a couple of things before we get started. I just want to draw your attention to the Q&A button. As questions come up for you during the session, please put them there. We'll have time at the end for questions. Remember to post chat to everyone, not just panelists, so that we can all see your comments and/or questions. We will be using the chat for engagement throughout the webinar. We would love to learn where you're joining us from today, so please comment in the chat your location. Patty is very passionate about this topic. Take it away, Patty.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stephanie. It's a really great pleasure to be with you all today. Thank you. And I see a couple of people are still joining us, so let me kind of ramp up and do some introductions. By the way, Stephanie mentioned keeping your chat open. Please do so, because we are going to have some questions. We're going to have some interaction. We'd love to get some dialogue going and definitely want to hear your questions. You just saw Kathy pop onto the screen. Say hello, Kathy.
Hello, everyone.
Kathy's my colleague and longtime coach. You might recognize her from the Coaching Out of the Box 555 program. She's recently attained both her Diversity Certified Coach badge and has been certified as a trainer in this space. And just so happy to have you joining me today and delivering this webinar. Kathy, thank you so very much. And we're going to be hearing more from Kathy later in the program. So we don't have a lot of time. So I want to jump right in and talk to all of you about what I believe is a very, very important subject. And I just want to give a shout out, by the way. I said to use chat, so I have to look at it occasionally, right? A lot of folks from Ontario and Colorado. We have Nova Scotia, Vancouver, Columbia, Fairfax, Virginia. Thank you. Chicago, Illinois, Ottawa. Suffolk, that's in the UK. Thanks very much. Our mic and video have been disabled. Yes, we are going to keep everybody on mic and video disabled. If you have questions, put it in the question box. If you have something to say, put it in the chat box. And myself, as well as the team here, will continue to take a look at that. And then we have Katie from the Philippines. So welcome, everyone. Oh, wow. With the protests and pandemics and politics, believe it or not, 3 years in our rearview mirror. And yet at the same time, I feel like today more than ever, the expectations for us as coaches and leaders continue to change. In fact, I think the expectations for us as coaches are changing more now than ever. What we do know is that our clients and our employees, so I'm going to speak to you both as coaches and leaders, our clients and our employees, whether you're in a company, whether you have your own practice, whether you're an individual, has greater expectations that we discuss and we respect their dimensions of difference, whether that's through a diversity lens or a cultural lens or both. Unfortunately, it's an uncomfortable truth about today's coaching profession that there's a disturbing lack of diversity among professional coaches. And there's, I believe, a lack of understanding about diversity among coaches themselves. It's for this reason, now is the time for our profession and for each of us as individual coaches to explore ways of enhancing the client's experience and embracing diversity and bringing it forward in the coach exchange. What does this mean? Coaches, we need to reassess ourselves and our coach approach. It requires us to do some work on ourselves, to understand our dimensions of difference, to explore our bias, and maybe even to change our coach approach to become more in alignment with the ICF's expectations of their values, as well as their competencies. We also need to aim our focus at our clients who see diversity through their lived experiences, through their lenses. Remember, as coaches, we cannot walk in the footsteps of our clients, but we can see and respect the footsteps that they have taken. Where they have been is important as we help them to understand a path forward. And that's what coaching is all about, the path forward. Because if we're not talking about their dimensions of difference and how their difference impacts their lives, are we really coaching the whole person? Are we helping them to move forward? These are the concepts that I'd like to talk with you today, to share, to explore. I believe they're critical as each of us consider whether we are continuing to learn and grow as a coach and expand our understanding of diversity and what it means in the coaching exchange. This is a way to enhance your coaching skills. It is a way to differentiate yourself as a coach. You can become a certified diversity coach. It might be an alternative way to address your diverse client base, or even focus on employee retention or client retention. Today, I hope you're going to walk away with some new knowledge. I know you'll definitely walk away with more interest and maybe even some more questions, so that you can continue the conversation, continue the dialogue, continue the research, and continue your journey in the area of diversity and inclusion. So I'd like to get us started. I'd like to run a short video just to kind of introduce us to some language and some topics. And as you watch the video, think about, what does diversity mean to you?
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn? Hvem er bonusforældre?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark.
So I just love the power in that video and the emotion that you can see expressed in the individuals participating. I think it reminds us that diversity and inclusion begins with each and every one of us and how we connect to each other. I love the quote, acknowledge the courage of others in being different. I mean, that's something we can definitely do as coaches. It also demonstrates that the issues of diversity, equity, inclusion go way beyond the United States, way beyond any borders. It goes across any and all countries and cultures. This video is meant to invoke ideas and thoughts about why inclusion is important and why making assumptions can be harmful. And it may have made you aware of your own discomfort about certain questions or an aspect of difference. The issues of diversity and inclusion, I believe, are actually quite simple. It's being human. In fact, it's a human to human interaction. And yet they can also be complex. As humans, we find it easier to connect with people who are similar, and we find it very difficult to connect with those who are different. And I'd like you to think about that. And I'd like you to think about a time when you felt different. Maybe it was the first time you felt different. What story would you tell? And when you're thinking about that, I'd love for you to describe your emotions and put them into the chat. So as you're thinking about the stories about the first time you felt different or a time you felt different, how did you actually feel? And Kathy, I'd love to start with you. You can tell your story, I'll tell my story. And as folks are populating the chat and telling us what their feelings were. So go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, certainly not probably the first, but in this work that I've done and in revisiting my history of this, I'll just tell this story briefly. We in 2011 had the beautiful opportunity of traveling to China to receive our daughter through a process of adoption. So if you can just picture that, right? Me, right? Blonde hair, blue eyes, getting off a plane in the Beijing airport. Very powerful emotion. The process itself is powerful, but taking a look around and just throughout the whole trip, just being on the streets, being in the culture and the environment where people were looking at me. I thought they were looking at me, and guess what? They were looking at me. And to add on to that, as a mother, we also took our 2-year-old daughter with us at that time, who is blonde hair, also very blonde. So how did I feel in that? I felt scared. I felt, very different, obviously, from the masses, where you were walking down a street with, anybody that's been there, just the volume of people, where you look around and I didn't look like them, any of them. Different, scared, different, anxious, protective of my blonde-haired daughter. Just stories about, and it wasn't in a scary way where they would come up to her, but they would want to come up and look at her because she was so different. So just an example of a story where I can really say I felt very, very different.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I see Michael put into the chat fear as well. And you use the word scared. And please continue to think about your story and put it into chat. My brief story, it was the first time I shared a kiss. I was probably 5, 6, 7 years old. I mean, you're a kid, you're having fun, you don't know what you're doing. And I kissed this young man. His name was Lance Tillman, and he, oh gosh, he was so cute. I remember it like it was yesterday. Well, my mother found out, and she was appalled, and she was just so mad. And it wasn't because I was like first grade, 5 or 6, or because I kissed a boy. It was the fact that he was Black and I was white. And it was 1968 in New Jersey, and there were a bit of race riots going on. And he lived on one side of the town, and I lived on the other side of the town. And I remember going home, and my parents' reaction, oh gosh, I felt embarrassed. I knew I did something wrong. I didn't know what it was, but I felt a lot of shame, and I felt a lot of confusion. And I'm seeing scared of judgment, uncomfortable, unsure, embarrassed, vulnerable, confused, alone. Thank you, Barb. Alone. Yeah, alone is one of those words that I hear often when I ask this question and I do this exercise in the work that I do. What continues to amaze me, though, is the negativity that comes up with the thoughts and the feelings and the stories of being different. You know, these memories that we have, and by the way, we all have them. Every single individual has this one moment, this one time that you walked into a meeting, you walked into a room, you walked into the lunchroom, that you felt different. And these usually are the way that we begin to think about and express the dimensions of diversity, because we're feeling this difference. We're feeling that we are the ones that stand out. We are the ones that are alone. We're the ones that are isolated. And we spend so much time trying to fit in and find things that we have in common with people that we forget sometimes what it's like to feel different, what it feels like to be unique. But these are the memories that we carry with us. These are our lived experiences. This is what we have inside ourselves that shape our beliefs, that shape our stories. And it also shapes our clients' stories, our clients' experiences. This is what our clients bring with us too. We all see the world differently. And we all see the world through our dimensions of difference. And as you can see here, and this is a model that I had put together based on the pioneering work by Loden, Rosener, Garden-Schwartz, and Rowe, I see it in these three layers, right? So many people focus on age, race, sexual orientation, and gender. You know, that's what I hear so much of when I'm doing seminars and speaking engagements. It's always mostly age and race and gender, age and race and gender. But when you think about it, there's this convergence of diversity that we have. Whether it's our biological, kind of like the way we're born, that's your DNA, whether it's around the way we grew up and the decisions that we or others have made that have impacted our lives, like education and religion and family status, or whether it's even where we work and who we work with. Sometimes that's what a lot of people have in common, but even in that place where there's commonality, there is in fact differences. But all of this drives our belief, drives our values. And I believe at times we're totally unaware of the way diversity is impacting the way we perceive others and also the way we perceive ourselves. And this can shape barriers. This can shape roadblocks. There's an incredible amount of energy that needs to go into fitting in and overcoming and embracing our diversity in order to make it a strength. That's not something that just happens overnight. So as coaches, I'd like you to just reflect for a moment. You might even want to write down these questions and reflect long after this session. How would you describe your dimensions of diversity? How has your diversity shaped who you are? And which areas of your diversity influence your thinking, your values, and your beliefs? Because you bring that with you no matter where you go, coaches. Whether you're interacting with a client, an employee, or even in your community, you are bringing that with you. Now, as you reflect on these dimensions of diversity, consider the role they play in your client's state of mind and their willingness to share with you. How do your clients experience their diversity? And how does it shape their beliefs and their values? So the backdrop of this concept of what is diversity, I want to talk a little bit about not only diversity, but what is inclusion and how I kind of see the difference here. You might have heard the saying, diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. But I want to give that a little bit more energy and share with you an analogy that I think kind of works here. The way I think about it is pieces of puzzle, diversity. Diversity represents the 1,000 pieces of puzzles that you just dumped on your dining room table and you began to sort in order to complete this puzzle. And the red goes here, and the blue goes here, and the green goes here, and the yellow goes here. This is recognizing diversity. 1,000 pieces of a puzzle and no two are the same. We just demonstrated our diversity. We have hundreds of people on this call, and we are all unique and we're all different. I asked you to think about a time when you were different, and we know what that feels like. Loneliness, fear, disconnected, scared of judgment, confused, vulnerable. Now, I want you to just close your eyes for a minute. I know this, it's interesting because we're on Zoom, right? But close your eyes for a minute and think about a time that you felt included. Think about a time that you felt included. You won the game. You nailed the presentation. You got the promotion. You got married. You had a child. You're on the top of the world. What do those emotions feel like? And I encourage you to put those emotions into chat, right? When you're excited, when you feel proud, when you have energy, when you feel like you're on the top of the world. And notice the difference between what it feels like to be different and what it feels like to be included. And inclusion has acceptance, joy, confidence, to be seen. Thank you. And what I give to you is to think about, back to our analogy of this puzzle, is that the emotions of inclusion are far more positive and uplifting than those you listed as being different. And there is our opportunity to go on that journey. Because you see, when we're different, it isn't until we are linking the pieces of the puzzle together, when they're snuggling together, when you hear it snap, and you start building out this beautiful picture of the flowers, that you see that inclusion has incredible power, incredible emotion. And that everyone feels this diversity, this difference, but it isn't until we unlock the potential, we unlock the emotion of inclusion, that we can turn that into something powerful, something meaningful. That is where people feel engaged. That is when they feel confidence. That is when they feel innovative, creative, productive, engaged. So for those of you who are coaching inside companies, you may have coaching programs and leadership development programs, but does everybody have access? Is everybody included? Does the decision process intentionally include all or exclude some marginalized or underrepresented people? For those of you who are leaders, how do you conduct purposeful or critical conversations, including conversations through the lens of diversity? For those in your own coaching practice, does your outreach and marketing specifically include marginalized and underrepresented individuals? Do they feel as though they can enter in a coaching engagement with you because you're embracing the elements of diversity? And those of you who coach, how are you exploring the dimensions of diversity of your clients and of yourselves inside the coach exchange? See, I think we've talked a little bit about what is diversity. We've talked a little bit about what is inclusion. But I think the power of this is in the relationship between the client and the coach, for us to explore what is within ourselves. How do we define diversity? What does it mean and how does it shape us? We have to do a lot of work in that space to understand how our diversity might impact the way we coach, who we coach, and the style and the approach that we use. How do we bring our experiences into the coach exchange? How do we stay in the growth mindset and yet still embrace the dimensions of diversity? On the other hand, we have to see this through the client's awareness. We have to think about the client and have them in the forefront of our partnership. Does an aspect of our client's diversity marginalize their self-value? What do they cover up? How can we honor their diversity? And I think most importantly, how can we adjust our coach approach so that we are seeing them through the lens of diversity? And I believe this will enable us to have a deeper exploration of who is our client and how do they bring their whole selves into every interaction, including their dimensions of diversity, in order to move forward. It's important for you to hear yourself and practice saying questions that might be much more difficult and much more uncomfortable if they're through the lens of diversity. You need to be aware of yourself. You have to remove self-doubt. You have to remove judgment in order to serve your client and serve their lived experiences. I want to demonstrate why You need to balance your perception of yourself and the perception of your client in order to go through this reshaping of the coach-client exchange. So what I'm going to do here is I'd like you to all kind of put your eyes on the screen. I'm going to show you a picture. Have your chat ready as well, because I'm going to show you this picture. I'm going to show it to you 2 seconds, right? And then I'm going to ask you what you see. And I'd like everybody to populate the chat with what it is that you saw. All right. Are you ready? Okay, here it comes. I'm going to show you the picture. All right. What did you see? What did you see? Go ahead and populate it in the chat here. And I just think it's very interesting that your brain was processing information so quickly. I mean, we're talking within nanoseconds, right? Even though I told you I was going to show you a picture, I told you what the instructions were, we all saw something, you know, somewhat unique. So I'm going to go back through here because this always makes me laugh, to be quite honest with you. So a person with binoculars, a car. A man with binoculars, the letter A. A man with a hat. A person looking through binoculars, a road, a car, a hat, a man with binoculars. It switched to an owl for some reason. Thank you, Katie. I love that. A man spying. I had the wrong screen. Sorry, I didn't see anything. Thanks for your honesty. Yeah, look at that. We all were looking at the same thing, yet what we see and what we hear and what we experience is very different depending on who you are. And it's all dependent upon how you have lived your life, because you are seeing things and hearing things and experiencing things through your own lenses. Why is this important? As you know, we process information in this near instantaneous way, and it happens automatically to all of us. It's intuitive. It takes no effort at all. It's driven by our instincts and it's driven by our experiences. We fill in information that we don't have based on our own lived experiences. We're overconfident in our own beliefs, and our own bias and belief systems cloud our ability to see anything differently. We become very adamant that what we saw is what we saw. So the person who saw the road and the man with a hat and binoculars, I'm going to go back here so you can see it for a minute. There's the car with the wheels, which could also be binoculars with hands of a man or a person in a hat driving down a road, or an exclamation point, or an owl, or a picnic table. I've heard so many different things when looking at this picture. So I believe, especially as coaches, that we need a more deliberate process of thinking, which is slower. And it requires more effort, and it requires us to be more conscientious, and it requires us to be just a little bit more logical. We need to work really hard to see things in different ways, to spend time looking at different perspectives, for asking for different perspectives, for asking different questions. And when we decide what questions to ask our clients, we need to then explore what their thoughts are, what their ideas are, what their issues are. So we need to slow down, ask different questions, dig deeper, ask more examples and perspectives, and really see our clients for who they are. Since we're each different, and we're each seeing things and processing things in a different way, we need to also take account how we're seeing and processing information, but also how our clients are seeing and processing information within their own context. In my practice, about 98% of my clients are marginalized individuals. And for me, that means women, minorities, people with disabilities, LGBT, veterans. So it's important for me to ask these questions. It's important for me to know who they are, because I use that information to better know them and to better understand them so that I can ask better questions, deeper questions. All of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with the iceberg. We want to get below the surface line. So I'm going to share you an example of one of my clients and how this kind of worked. And then I'm going to ask Kathy to come in and share one of her examples. I was working with a client, we'll call them Ari. And we were talking about isolation and focusing on the feeling of isolation. And what was so intriguing to me is that Ari never used pronouns. So they were talking and sharing, and I never heard a pronoun come up. So finally I asked Ari straight out, what pronouns do you use? And the answer was they, them. So we began exploring the feelings of being non-binary. And when talking about being gender fluid, Ari began talking much more about the impact of their gender identity on making friends and on losing friends and of being afraid to build relationships because of the fear of losing or the fear of having to disclose. There's that fear in being different again. Somebody used that word earlier. So by me asking about how they show up, what are their personal pronouns? It took the conversation of isolation in a new direction. It was an opportunity to check in on my clients' dimensions of diversity. It took courage for me, and the actually seeing my client and hearing into what they were saying, what they were saying in order to ask that question. Hey, Kathy, I'm going to ask you to come back and share an example if you've had perhaps with a client where that lens of diversity just brought you to a different place.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, we're going to call him Phil. Phil was a gentleman that I was working with, and we'd coached for a while, we'd probably had maybe 6-8 sessions, and I'd known Phil previously. This is when I was working in a large organization, so had interacted with him previously. But he was bringing to the coaching conversation just challenges around feeling like his career progression had really come to a stalemate. Just a couple other things around Phil. Phil was a paraplegic. He was in a wheelchair. And also Phil was an Olympian, a paraplegic Olympian. And so I always saw him, so amazing that he was able to do what he did. And so my view of him was very different than how he viewed himself. So I just came out and asked him, can you tell me a little bit more? I'm curious about how your experience of living in a wheelchair for the amount of time. He was injured in life, and so he became paralyzed through an accident. And it was so emotional for him that he actually said to me, do you realize that in my whole experience, nobody has ever asked me that question?
Wow.
And so then it was just like, right? Like our conversation just went to a totally different space where I just honored the fact that he needed this space to talk about an area so much a part of him that nobody had ever wanted to, or nobody allowed a space for him to talk in before.
And I would say, not only did you create that space for him, but you had the courage to ask the question that no one had the courage to ask before. And that's because of the work that you've done with regard to acknowledging and understanding that you have to go into that space to see diversity through the lens of your client. So thank you.
Well, and recognize him, like you've said so beautifully, recognize him as that. This is the whole person of who he was. By not acknowledging the fact that this is potentially how is he experiencing this? I can't experience that. Yeah. But yeah, it was really, really powerful.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. Yeah. And it's just, our examples, and I have a whole list of examples here. I'm sure Kathy does as well that we can share, but it just begins to open up your minds about why looking at coaching through the lens of diversity brings you to a different place. As coaches, we simply can't choose what to discuss or what our clients should be talking about. We just can't put our biases away. Our biases and our diversity is a part of who we are. And we need, as coaches, to then be prepared to go where our clients want to lead us, but we have to be ready to go there. We have to do the work on ourselves first to prepare ourselves to go down that journey of diversity. So how do we do this? And I'm not going to say, I'm going to give you the answer in the next 15 minutes. There's a lot of work that needs to be done here, but I'm going to give you 1 or 2 or 3 techniques that we talk about in my 8-week program that really gets a lot deeper into some of these subjects. But even today, I think 2 or 3 of these things you would be able to walk away with and use and share and do differently. So first of all, as a coach, supporting your client and their diversity without being grounded in the meaning, understanding of diversity is kind of like trying to parallel park a car with one eye. I mean, you have to do the hard work of understanding what is diversity, what does it mean to yourself, what are the lenses that drive your values and your beliefs, and then you have to stand ready to receive the values and the beliefs and the lenses of diversity of your clients. How do you coach somebody if you don't know who they really truly are? Without understanding the client's diversity, you don't see their whole picture. When coaching through the lens of diversity, you're actually giving the power back to the client and empowering them to have the difficult questions. You're empowering yourself to ask deeper questions, and you're empowering your client to be able to peel away the layers of themselves and reveal more and more. Your coach approach must create this safe environment in which people feel that security and that trust, and they're willing to reveal who they are, their whole self. This doesn't happen overnight. This isn't your first conversation. But to my example and Kathy's example, this is when you're working with your client and building that environment of trust. I built this acronym that I use called Be Sure, SHUR, Be Sure, in your coach approach, because your client wants to be seen, to be heard, to be understood, and to be respected in each and every exchange that you have. It means that the coach needs to build safe spaces, ensuring and demonstrating that you as the coach has the right intent and that you have the trust and the willingness to engage with your client to ask these deeper questions. As Kathy's example was, having the courage to go deeper and say, tell me about, I see you're in a wheelchair. I'm curious about you. Tell me more about how that has shaped who you are. A coach needs to be curious about who their client is, how they show up, and what's driving their thinking, their emotions, and their beliefs. Asking the client more difficult questions, different questions, and bringing in those dimensions of difference takes a significant amount of courage and curiosity. You're going to stumble a couple of times and just simply ask for grace. I'm sorry, I might not be asking this question the right way, but I'm curious. And know inside that you have the courage to ask these different, more difficult questions. You can be uncomfortable, but you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because you have to go to places that you might not have lived. You might have to go to places that are not in your definition of diversity. Diversity in coaching is about understanding the mindset of your client within their larger context. It's cultural, it's systemic, and it's contextual as far as the awareness that you're trying to build. It's just not the content of the conversation or the content of the scenario or the content of their issue. You have to go way beyond that and understand this systemic, cultural, contextual, and diverse context. So let me share with you again a little bit of a demo of one of the techniques that I use and that we practice quite a bit in the 8-week program, of how we can adjust our coach approach through the lenses of diversity, through reframing questions and going to this place of being more courageous and more curious. So I'm going to ask Kathy to come back here and join me. So when we incorporate diversity and inclusion into our coaching practice, as I'm saying, we're able to go to this place of asking deeper and different questions with more curiosity and more courageousness. And I believe it enables us as coaches to bring the questions to questions that are good, to questions that are great. So we all know what good coaching questions are to ask. We probably have our go-to questions, probably have lists of questions. You've probably gotten books of published questions that good coaches ask. Yet making the question more about the uniqueness and the diversity of the person is really how you create a great question. So a good question, we all ask it. So client, what are your beliefs? But how would we reframe that question through the lens of diversity? Kathy, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to go back and I'm going to use Phil as an example, right? And just use, so I would reframe this into saying, so how has being in a wheelchair shaped your beliefs?
Yeah, wow.
Your
Powerful.
beliefs about, whatever it is, right? Beliefs about yourself, beliefs about what you can achieve, beliefs about, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
you can explore that for some time, right? Because
Mhm.
just changing and shifting that perspective can bring you into a lot of different conversations and bring up a lot of different lived experiences, memories, emotions, thoughts,
Yeah.
beliefs, right? And so
Yeah.
what we simply did there was we inserted the concept of difference and asked not just what are your beliefs, but how has your difference molded or shaped your beliefs? And that again has just changed the perspectives of how that conversation can continue with the coach. So another question that we might ask in order to reframe a good question into a great question through this lens of diversity. What are the barriers to your career progression? Kathy, what thoughts might you have on that question?
Sure. So how has being a young woman influenced your thoughts about your career?
Yeah. So two dimensions there, young,
Mhm.
right? Because we know there's generational differences in the way people think about age, right?
Yeah.
And how they think about careers and work. And then the gender differences. So you're really seeing your client, not just a, what's the word, like a plain vanilla question, but really digging in deeper to understand
Yeah.
what he, as a younger career individual, is experiencing. So again, I inserted the question, it might be, lower tier of the company, lower tier of the company versus senior executives. They experience careers, they experience progression differently. They have different perspectives in how they're navigating and managing their careers. And so again, this is just two simple examples that Kathy and I bring to you. But what I give to you to think about is the next time you ask a question, and this is going to happen, it might happen this afternoon, it might happen tomorrow, coaches, but when you're asking a question, leaders of your employees or of your clients, just pause a second and just ask, how can you make that question from a good question to a great question? How can you really demonstrate to your client, to your employee, that you are really seeing them and understanding them and hearing them for their whole self? And you're willing to have that courageous and curious conversation with them. I saw Stephanie's comment suggesting using a wheelchair instead of being in a wheelchair. And thank you so much for that. And I'll tell you why that was just so powerful. I've been in this business for over 20 years. And not a day goes by, not a conversation goes by that I don't learn something. I don't believe anyone can ever be a subject matter expert in the area of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I believe we're just lifelong learners that have a passion for this and have picked up some interesting stories and insights and conversations along the way. So thank you for that, because we are continuous learners. And that continuous learning, that growth mindset, is what enables us to ask those deeper, more curious questions. that is what enables us to have the courage to do so.
Yeah. And, I'm just going to add something to that too, is that, as a coach, and so I put that out there, like I have to fight back on that feeling of, I'm sorry, like did I say something and how did it offend or how did it, but it's like you said, it's taking it and I'm learning that's, because obviously, like, thank you, Stephanie, from your perspective of how just a couple of those words can show more respect to the person that I'm working with. So thank you, and not get my feelings hurt and not feel bad, right? It's staying in that position. Yeah.
So often throughout our lives, and this depends on where you're growing up in the world, we are taught what to say and what not to say. We are taught how to say it. We are taught what conversations we should have. We talk about what subjects are taboo. And yet what we're doing here as adults, as coaches, is somewhat undoing a lot of the things that we've been taught to do in order to have that courage and reshape the conversations and discussions and the questions that we're having with our clients. It's okay to talk about race. It's okay to talk about age. It's okay to talk about ability, special ability, disability. It's okay to have conversations about religion and politics. It's the mindset with which you have those conversations, and you need to bring in with you that growth mindset. I see that we're starting to have a couple of questions here. Stephanie, what I'm going to do is, let me just go to my next slide, and then we're going to open it up for all questions, because I want to just kind of bring this home as folks are thinking about their questions, and please start populating them into the Q&A for us to read here and respond to. So as coaches, this is kind of, I guess I'm gonna say my closing slide here, right? We must have this wider lens in order to allow the dimensions of diversity to be more evident to us, and that we can take those dimensions of difference and make them be inclusive into the conversations that we're having. It's a powerful tool. It's a very powerful tool. Whether you're an ethnic minority, a marginalized individual, whether you're a male or a female, whether you're white or black, whether you're gay or straight, whether you're tall or thin, married or not, kids or not, all of these need to be brought into our conversation so that we can really dig in and embrace the whole person for who they are. A lack of understanding of diversity among coaches means that there's a real risk that our clients may be unconsciously keeping information from us or consciously editing parts of their whole self that they actually need to be coached on, right? They're shutting their doors because we're not allowing them, creating that space for safety, or asking them, giving them permission to bring those spaces forward. So we have to be aware of this. As coaches, again, this acronym that I use, like I almost meditate on it. Do I see them? Do I hear them, my clients? Am I seeking to understand them? Am I demonstrating respect? Do I respect their beliefs, their culture, and other facets of their life that might delay or even prevent them from taking opportunities to be coached, or might be the barriers of them moving forward in their careers, or whatever it is might be standing in their way, which is why they are in the coaching scenario in the first place. So the diversity journey really requires us as coaches to be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Asking questions, maybe we ask them wrong, maybe we use the wrong words, but put it out there and yet let the client work with you. It's a partnership, remember? It's a safe space. It's a safe space for both of you. Embrace your own diversity, embrace the diversity of others. Understand that impact that diversity has on our lives and how it's shaped us. Think about diversity and the pain that it causes and why it is so hard to talk about. And then think about inclusion and how, if we can unlock it and unleash it, it can be a powerful way for us to be the strongest, most confident selves that we can be. And in this way, we're coaching the whole person. We're reframing the questions from good questions to great questions, and we're getting this deeper meaning from your clients. In the end, We're partnering with our clients to unleash their diversity so they can see it, they can embrace it, they can explore it, they can celebrate it and recognize their strength. We need to embrace diversity in coaching so collectively we can see the world from a wider lens, and we have the tools to empathize and empower our clients, and hence we all become allies. So I'd love for all of you to take just a few seconds, 10 seconds, tap into your natural curiosity. Convert your thoughts that you're having right now, your emotions, your questions, your curiosity, your courageousness, and place it into the Q&A as a question. Challenge us to give an example, challenge us to think differently. This is the beginning of the conversation through the lens of diversity. So thank you. So Stephanie, I see that we have a question here. How can we ask questions about diversity that are not visible? Are there great general questions we can ask everyone? Yeah. So what I generally tend in an intake, right? Very important for me to do an intake. And I think, by the way, it's also important for the client to go through an intake so they really get to see who you are. And I explain to my clients, there are no questions that are, how do I say it differently? All questions are on the table, right? There's nothing that I can't ask and there's nothing that they can't ask. This has to be an open and honest and trustworthy. I ask my clients to introduce themselves. I ask my clients to give me stories about their life. I ask them to explain their difference. I ask them to tell me stories about how they've experienced life. And I tend to do that through storytelling. I ask them to tell me their stories. I ask them to tell me when they have felt different. Ask them when they have felt proud. Ask them when they have felt. This gives me such a great perspective of who they are, where they've come from, and again, the footsteps that they have left in their past, because that really grounds us in what are some of the conversations and the discussions that we may have or may not have, right, as we move forward in our relationship. So I'm so hopefully, Barb, that's answers your question. You know, I think it's also different in different parts of the world. Okay, so here in the United States, we can be a little bit more adamant about asking, oh, so hey, are you celebrating Christmas? You know, what religion are you? Or, you know, what race are you? What ethnicity? We can ask that right out. Now, we can't use that against the person. We can't fire because of that. We can't promote because of that. We can't not hire because of that, et cetera. So we have to be careful, but we can do that. Other parts of the world, you can't. And so by asking storytelling questions, asking questions about their experiences in life, when did they have a positive experience? When did they have a negative experience? You can pull these things out. You know, it's about asking them and getting them to open up. Okay. Joni here, how might my biases leak into my coaching conversations and prevent me from seeing or hearing my coachee? Okay, so I'm going to tell you, I told you I had a host of examples that I could bring here. I'll give you another example. So I was coaching with one of my clients. What are we going to call her? We're going to call her Melanie. I don't know, I just made that up. And she was talking about work-life balance and how hard it is because she's trying to get ahead. And the environment, the company she was working for just wasn't supportive of her. And she was having a real difficult time, feeling like she was getting burnt out. And so what I said was, you know, what I hear you saying is, you know, it might be time for you to start looking for a new job. And I knew as soon as the words came out of my mouth that it might not have been the right thing to say. And so Melanie said to me, well, Patty, you know, you're looking at the situation through your lens. I don't have the benefit of going to find a new job. I have been here for 15 years. I have good benefits. I'm a single mom of 3 kids. I can't just pick up and start somewhere else. I've got to make where I'm at work. Oof, drop the mic moment, right? And so I don't think Joni, that we prevent our biases from coming into the conversations. I think we tried to hold them in check, but I think they leak out. And I think we have to have the courage and the conviction to stand with them and say, wow, thank you. Kind of what Kathy was saying. Thank you. I didn't think of it that way. I apologize. Let's take this in a different direction. Now I better understand your situation. We can pause and we can try to pipe down our own beliefs, our own situations. We do a lot of work and reflection and trying to be aware of those things. But let's face it, we all have unconscious bias. They will leak out. Most important thing that we can do in that period of time, though, is how do we then respond to that? We embrace it. I just learned something in that moment. I will never make that mistake again. I now know how to better phrase that question. Probably wasn't a good question to begin with, right? And I move on, and my client moves on, and I'm still coaching her. You know, this is like a year later, right? So it was that mind growing opportunity, and we learned together. Stephanie, I see more questions. And at the same time, I'm very sensitive to the time here. We have about 4 minutes. I know there were a couple of things that we also wanted to share with the folks that we have here today. One of them is I have an 8-week program that I mentioned. It's not going to be a hard sell. All I'm saying is we just start to scratch the surface here. In this 8-week program, we really dig a little bit deeper into diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. What does that mean into the coached context? We spend about 4 weeks doing that. It's a little bit of a primer, but I have both experienced as well as new people together having a conversation. All the time we are thinking about, and what does that mean to the coach? What does that mean to the client? And then later on in the program, a lot of practice, a lot of scenarios, live demos, we really get into. So how do we do this? Like, what does it mean? How do I reframe that question? What do I need to be aware of? A lot of the questions that I'm seeing you guys ask here today. Next class begins in 2 weeks, February 7th. If you can't make it, we're going to start up another class on May 2nd. So if you can, please join us. Stephanie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Patty, for providing us with your insights and expertise on this subject. We hope that everyone is able to bring a wider lens for inclusion in your coaching exchanges. I just want to share a little bit more about Coaching Out of the Box. This is just an overview of students who are using Coaching Out of the Box. As you can see, we're all over the world with over 30,000 people have taken our programs in over 38 countries, and just different types of people that take our programs: business, healthcare, government, line supervisors to C-suite executives, union and non-union environments, as well as professors, PhDs. There's so many people that are taking our courses. And then if you could go to the next slide, here are some upcoming offerings that we have. So we've got our fast track starting on March 7th. That's an evening course. And then there's a few other ones starting after. And of course, the diversity starting in 2 weeks. You can always reach out to us at any time. You can schedule a call with our enrollment coach, Ellie Tava. She'd be happy to talk to you about our programs. And I just want to take another moment to thank both Patty and Kathy for your insights on this important topic, and to our admin team for supporting in the background. It always takes a team to put these on. And to wrap up today's session, I invite you to take a moment just to reflect on our webinar and maybe journal on your thoughts. Thank you all for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting this webinar. We've got 2 minutes left. If we have any questions, please.
So Stephanie, just talk a little bit. The webinar was recorded. It will be made live, not live, but it will be sent out again to folks.
Yes, with the slide deck, we'll send that out as well as a PDF, and so everybody will get all that in a couple of days after the webinar. So,
and obviously everything is always available at Coaching Out of the Box. If you would like any particular slide, if you would like to continue the conversation, you can always email me at patricia@coachingoutofthebox.com, and of course Kathy, also a member of Coaching Out of the Box team. So on behalf of Kathy and Stephanie, thank you very, very much. And hopefully during your next coaching session, be brave enough to ask a different, deeper question through the lens of diversity. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. We'll see you all on the next one.
Take care.